Greetings, Pokefans! Zag Attack here, and today we're going to be breaking down the Pittsburgh Steelixers ZDL Season 1 draft. And the way draft usually works when it comes to team building and things like that, or just like this is how like the draft goes in general, is that you have 120 points, and it's a snake style draft. You got 120 points to work with. Each Pokemon is designated a point total between 1 and 19, and you can pick up to 10 to 11 Pokemon with that 120 point total. And of course, you gotta pick Terra Captains for your team as well. You get 15 points for those, and you can have up to 2 or 3. Um, of course, now I joined a little bit late. I'm joining into the third week of the season. I still have to play my week 1 opponent though, but I'm joining into the third week of the season, so I had to build a team from what was left on the board, which there were a lot of really good options still left on the board, so I had to use that to my advantage. I looked around, see what I saw, what I wanted, and built accordingly. I don't know if it's the best team, but I think even though I'm not like the most knowledgeable and competitive, it's still a solid team and it's definitely something that's going to cause a lot of chaos in this league if I build my team correctly. So let's go ahead and dive in to what I drafted and why. Starting off, we have Chi Yu. And Chi Yu is one of those ruined legendaries. Um, and my favorite of them. In a singles competitive format, its Beads of Ruin ability is actually pretty solid, because what that allows Chi to do is lower the special defense of the opposing Pokemon, and since it's a special attacker itself, deal big damage in return. So it's a really, really strong Pokemon, and it's got solid coverage options as well. Not as many as I would like, but it's got solid coverage options. Um, and of course, since and it's got the speed to match up with it as well. It's not the fastest Pokemon in the format, but it's fast enough to be able to deal with some of the top threats with enough speed investment. And I really, really want that in a number 1 overall pick. It's so good, it's so solid, and I think it's going to cause a lot of chaos in this league, particularly for Pokemon that, particularly for an opponent that doesn't really match up well against it. For my second Pokemon, I realized I needed some hazard removal, and some really solid uh, physical attacker with a strong typing that could do solid damage in return. And there is no other Pokemon that fits those 3 criteria better than Iron Treads. Iron Treads is a bit of an odd Pokemon, because its ability is Corp Drive, and the only Pokemon in the format that can, get Electric Terrain up with its ability is Pincurchin. And Pincurchin's not really that good. So how am I going to utilize Corp Drive to my advantage? Simple. A Booster Energy. A Booster Energy is one of those items you can give to a Paradox Pokemon, and it can get the effect that way. Of course, I don't always have to utilize Corp Drive, and it's not always going to be the most logical sense in every single matchup, but it's always a solid option regardless of the matchup. And also, this thing can learn Stealth Rock's Rapid Spin, and it's Steel and Ground type, meaning that it's not only can be part of the Steel Dragon Fairy Core, but it's also it's like how she used part of my Fire Grass Water Core, but it's also a really strong Pokemon to counteract with that. So I really think that Iron Treads here could really be solid if put into the right situations and used correctly. This thing could be a menace. I cannot wait to use this Pokemon because I've seen this Pokemon put in work, and I can't wait to have it on my team. The next Pokemon on the squad is a reasonably solid Gen 9 starter that has had a lot of success with sweeping without even needing to set up. And that Pokemon is, of course, Quaquaval. Quaquaval is a bit of a weird Pokemon because its ability, or its hidden one, is Moxie. And every time it gets a knockout, it gets a +1 attack boost. But it also has a move called Aqua Step, a signature move that boosts its speed by 1 stage every time it's used. So imagine boosting your speed, getting a knockout, and then at the same time getting a +1 attack boost. It's like using Dragon Dance, but you get to use damage in the process. It's actually insane. And I don't know why this Pokemon was on the board. I was actually shocked this Pokemon was still on the board. Are you kidding me? Give me the Dancing Duck any day of the week. Are you kidding me? Now that I have my water type, it's time to go and get a partner for Iron Treads. And specifically, part of that fairy and Dragon Core. But what do I get? Well, I realized that a lot of my Pokemon thus far are not very bulky, and the speed control really isn't there. Kind of. So I needed a Pokemon that could um, take hits, but also take names. And while this Pokemon may not look bulky, it can be bulky with a certain tactics and investments. That Pokemon being Alolan Ninetales. Alolan Ninetales is a bit of an odd case because it's not bulky at all, but it can be bulky with Snow Warning. Snow boosts up Ice type's physical defense, and it gets an ability that sets up Snow, which is awesome. And it can get another defensive boost with Aurora Veil, which is basically reflected in Light Screen in 1, but it can only work if there's snow. And it's always snowing when this one's on the field. So, with that being said, I can not only make all of my team bulky, and they're already hard hitters as they are. If I ever need screens in a battle, Alola Ninetales is the one I can turn to. Of course, and it's not the only thing you can do, and it also, of course, screens the only thing it can do. It also can sell coverage options. It could be a sweeper. It can do a whole kinds of soft because its speed set's actually pretty relatively solid, and I can utilize its special attack is not great. It's its best offensive stat by a mile, so I can just use that to my advantage and make sure that Alolan Ninetales can stay on the field and dish out big damage in return. My next Pokemon, I realized, and for it, I realized I don't really have a second hazard removal or hazard stack. And you kind of need two. That way you're not always relying on one. And I also don't have a grounded poison either to remove toxic spikes if my opponent tries to bring them against me. There were a lot of things I needed going into this next pick, but I immediately decided to focus on this with my next one. And I decided the best Pokemon that fit those criterias, and that is reasonably strong in the process as well if I need it to be offensive, is Glamora. And Glamora is a bit of an interesting Pokemon because of the two abilities. The first one is Toxic Debris, which allows it to get up Toxic Spikes if it's hit by a contact move. This pairs well with other hazard attacking abilities with Stealth Rock and Spikes. And of course, getting all those up in a single battle could be pretty advantageous to me. Even if I base my strategy solely on hazard stack, just to beat my opponent, I mean, it's not the best PR in the world, but it's reasonably solid to deal with most teams in general, especially ones that are weak to rocks and spikes. Of course, Glamora is also reasonably strong as well. Don't underestimate this thing's offensive abilities. I could run this thing offensive And it even can learn Reflecting Light screen too, so I can even make this a screen set if I wanted to. So I got a lot of defensive options and support options as well, but even offensive options and with this Pokemon. It's actually pretty insane what this thing can do, and I can't wait to make my opponent figure out, hey, which set is it going to be, now? Now for my next pick, I needed more speed control and maybe some more offense as well. I realized that I didn't have a fast electric type, and fast electric types are really, really important in the format, especially if you can get one that's early and one that's good. Most of the solid electric type options were already off the board at this point. Like Hisuian Electra was one that I wanted, and it was already off the board. I don't remember if Jolteon was, but at this point, I didn't really have enough. At this point, it didn't really matter. Because Jolteon's fast, but a lot of my Pokemon, or at least of recent picks, were special, and I needed something physical to at least, make everything even. So, what did I choose? Well, this Pokemon you all guys might actually be familiar with because you've seen me use it a few times on my main channel, and that Pokemon is Pawmont. Pawmont is a electric type that's actually relatively fast as well, so it fits the criteria of my speedy electric type. It also, um, it's a signature move um, that only one of the Pokemon can get if you're not if you exclude Sketch Smeargle from that. And that move is Revival Blessing, which allows me to bring one favorite Pokemon back from the grave, but only at half health. And the only other Pokemon that can do that is Rapscut, and Rapscut's not good. So, um, and Palmont also has a lot of solid coverage moves as well. All can be paired with its hidden ability in Iron Fist, powering up punching moves just in general. So opponents could I could run Natural Cure if my Pokemon tries to will with me. I can run Bolt Absorb if my opposing team has a lot of Electric type coverage, and I can run Iron Fist just for sheer offensive power. No one's gonna know which one I bring until it's already too late. And of course, Revival Blessing is always an option. I don't always have to bring it, but it's always an option. So my opponent always has to be wary about that, and that could really help me out in prep. For my next Pokemon, I still haven't picked a Terra Captain yet, nor do I have many defensive options on my team as well. It was difficult to decide which my first Terra Captain was going to be, but then I remembered a certain frog, a certain goat, a certain um certain Pokemon, if you will, that I may or may not have used before. One that you guys are very familiar with. And I'm sure you guys all know which Pokemon that is by now. Please enter and give a warm welcome to Appleton. Appleton is here, obviously, just not because he's Bubby, but also because he has a very good ability and thick fat that allows him to eat ice and fire type moves. And so I can build my Terras around that. Appleton is my first Terra captain. And it's going to be Terra Dragon for extra dragon power, Terra Steel as a defensive option, and Terra Fire also as a defensive option. But Terra Fire is also relatively solid as well because all that fire is weak to, grass is strong again. So it's a really good pairing. And now my Dragon Steel Fairy Core is complete with this pickup. and I'm really happy about that. And you could also argue that my grass fire water core is completed, but we take care of that later down the road. But this Pokemon is really solid, not only because it's defensive, but because it has good special attack and even solid physical attack too. If I wanted to be mixed to and good HP to actually like be a solid Pokemon. It's slower than a bag of bricks, so I'm not gonna Choice Scarf this thing, but that speed doesn't matter. Because I could just as well bring Trick Room and let Bubby do what Bubby does best. Of course, I can even make this thing bulkier with certain items. I can make it offensive with certain items. I could, increase its longevity. Like, there's a lot of things that Bubby can do. Bubby can be a screen setter for all I care. Yes, you heard me right. Bubby could set screens for a battle if I needed to. I'm just saying. Bobby's the GOAT. There's nothing that anyone can say anything about. Bobby's the GOAT. And that's all I'm going to say. And of course, speaking of defensive options, my next Pokemon is also one of those defensive options. It's actually a really solid defensive option when you consider its abilities, but it can even be an offensive option, and that's what I really like about a Pokemon. One that's versatile, one that could literally be either or, and my opponent's never gonna know until I send it out onto the field. And of course, it's even a creature of the sky. Please welcome Gyarados. Gyarados can either be defensive with things like Intimidate or offensive with its ability Moxie. We already have a Moxie Pokemon, so I know you guys know that Moxie is good. And this is one of the two Pokemon on my team that can Dragon Dance. Gyarados is a really solid option, both offensively and defensively. So this could really be a pain for my opponent if it tries to bite me in the old tuchus. And I can not wait to use this thing and unleash a creature of the sky on some of my opponents. And it, whew, I can't wait to use this thing. This is gonna be awesome. Like this, good stuff. And I know you guys can't wait for it too. All right, now it's finally time to complete that fire, grass, and water core. So, and this next Pokemon is a bit of an odd one because while it doesn't look strong, nor does it really help with the speed control, it can do a lot of really solid things. And um, and that Pokemon, of course, is Sinistcha. And this thing could even set up Trick Room for Bubby if it wants to. Like this thing could go insane in a particular match if my opponent is not prepared for it. This Pokemon has solid recovery with things like Matcha Gotcha, Strength Sap, Giga Drain. It doesn't really have the best coverage in the world, but it's got good solid stat coverage, and that's what you want in a strong Pokemon. And this Pokemon could do some like really solid, like I said, really solid damage. And it works really well behind screens, and I got a lot of screen setters on my team. And there's a lot of hazard stack as well. Like this team could be good if I can learn to use it correctly. Because in the right hands, this team is busted. But like, I'm new to Draft League, so I have no idea what I'm doing. I just know, hey, this Pokemon is something I could use. Let me try and cook something up with it. Maybe it'll sweep a battle and I'm not expecting it. Like, hey, let me cook. All right. And Sinistcha's one of those Pokemon that could be insane in a particular matchup if it's not dealt with appropriately. And I can't wait to use this thing either. Now, by this point in the draft, I want to say 11 points left. But I also have 11 points left to use my Terra Captains. And I decided to break up those 11 points into 2 Terra Captains. And my first of those last 2 Terra Captains is Mudsdale. I wanted to build a team around Glastrier, but it was already taken, and as you can imagine, I was upset. So I took the next best horse option, Mudsdale. Mudsdale's stamina ability allows it to get a physical defense boost every time it gets hit by a move. Of course, you can also increase its bulk on the special side with things like Assault Vest as well to make it extra bulky. And of course, this is also one of my Terra Captains. I chose Ground Fairy and Fighting to power up. Ground power up is already good ground stab. Fighting for body press. And Fairy is there to mainly deal with dragons. I don't really, and also we don't really have a bulky fairy option on the team because even though we have Ninetales, I won't really want to call Ninetales a bulky fairy unless it's behind screens. So that's the reason for Terra Fairy on this thing. But Terra Fairy on Mudsteel could actually goes hard because the combination of ground and fairy just in general is so good because both of fairy's weaknesses are countered by ground. And also since the thing is so abysmally slow, this thing could work so well in Trick Room. And I mean so well in Trick Room. It's not even funny. And I cannot wait to use this thing. And like I said, I got a Trick Room setter in Sinistra. So I'm pretty sure I can set up Trick Room. Like I have to double check, but I'm really pretty sure it can. So this like I said, if you're not careful, you might get slipped by the horse. So this Pokemon, love it. Can't wait to use it. It's been a good Pokemon ever since its introduction in Draft League. And oh boy, you guys are gonna love it. Now, for my last Terra Captain, I wanted something also defensive, but something that could be offensive in general. Kind of like Gyarados, kind of like Mudsdale. You know what I mean? Like something that could like bulky offense. And as you guys can clearly see, I'm a big fan of bulky offense. So, and I picked a Pokemon that I've seen been used before, so that way I'm not totally lost. Like most of these Pokemon I've seen get used before, and I want to make sure that like my team is one I'm using from my first ever draft league is something that I can be comfortable with. And this last Pokemon is definitely something I can be comfortable with. And of course, that Pokemon, my last Terra Captain, is Altaria. Altaria can be a defensive option mainly on the physical side of things. And Terras I chose for are Dragon, Flying, and Steel. You might be wondering why I chose it for both of its stabs. Well, I could always make a transaction later in free agency if I need be. The last week for transactions is like week 6, I think, maybe week 5. So I'm not too worried about having to change Altaria's Terra types if I need to. But this is what I went with. One, because Dragon for one, because my only 2 dragons are an apple pie and this thing. So I don't really have strong dragon options. And if I need extra dragon power, I need Terra Dragon. I also went with Terra Flying for extra flying stab. And also for Team Scott. No, I'm kidding. But for extra flying stab, that one probably could get changed at some point if I need to make a transaction. But for now, it's Terra Flying, And for right now, I think it's a solid option to most of my opponent's teams. And then Terra Steel for bulk, because Terra Steel is really good just in general, and I really like it. And even though I'm already rocking Terra Steel on Appleton, it's fun to have a few repeats. As it actually makes your team a little bit easier to prep for, but also makes it a little more diverse at the same time because you have extra steel options and your opponent's never going to know which steel you're bringing. So, um, uh, and of course, another Dragon Dance Pokemon if need be. And that's my team for the first season of the ZDL. Let me know what you think about it down in the comments below. And if you're excited to see what I have in store as your head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelixers, I'm so excited for this season, and I know you guys are too. I really, really like the team that I drafted, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Although I could use some extra dragon coverage, but we're not going to worry about it. For right now, I can't wait to see y'all in the first battle, and I'll probably be back with another team builder. So at some point for our first battle um, against the Canadian Cerule Edges, coached by Zach Mander, the guy who invited me in, actually, which was kind of insane. So um, I can't wait for you guys to um, watch me play, see how well I do, and good luck to my brother in our first match. And that's all I have for now. Until next time, Poke fans. Gotta catch them all. Beesh.